Hello and welcome to the Sacred Rainbow Current Global Online Summit, bringing together the multifaceted custodians of our planet and humanity to reveal deep truths, wisdom, and tools to enable the guardianship of our planet for the future generations. Sacred protection, connection, and the holding of earthly and cosmic light portals is potent to humanity's highest timeline ascension. My name is Kerry Bridget McCrory, and I am your summit host and creator, airing from the Valley of Coniglen in the central Sperrin Mountains of Northern Ireland, Uru. My mountain is Spatnadua, and my river is the little streams that merge from the mountain tops into the burns into the valley below. Today, I am delighted to introduce you to Kedar Brown, who lives in the landscapes of Asheville, North Carolina in the USA. If you would like to say hello, Kedar.
Good morning and good afternoon. It's an honor to be here, Kerry. Thank you for the invitation to join you.
Thank you. So Kedar is the founder and director of Rites of Passage Council, an organization offering deep nature ceremonial encampments around the world. He is an internationally known ceremonialist, a healer, an intuitive and teacher of psychological and spiritual awareness with over 35 years of professional experience. Over this time, Kedar has developed an effective and unique approach to emotional and spiritual healing by braiding together his depth of clinical knowledge of experiential psychotherapies with more nature-based indigenous wisdom teachings and healing methods from around the world. In 1994, Kedar apprenticed with Stephen Foster and Meredith Little at the School of Lost Borders in the Sierra Nevada mountains in the form and process of the Vision Quest ceremony and eco-psychology. He has also apprenticed for many years with Maladoma Som, PhD, initiated elder and shaman of the Dagara tribe of Burkina Faso, West Africa. Kedar has also had the honour and privilege to learn many valuable insights into healing from his apprenticeship with Cherokee elder and medicine person Will Rocking Bear. So a testament to Kedar's work is as follows. I have known Kedar for a long time as a man of spirit with remarkable devotion to healing. He tends to his duty with royalty and ferocious commitment. As a man who hears the call of earth and nature, Kedar extends his hand to those in quest to change and transformation and is always willing to lead them into and guide them through a deep sense of communion with themselves. Having worked with him in a number of rituals and ceremonies and watched carefully the way he gives of himself to spirit, I have come to respect his priestly devotion to the sacred in nature and in every human. His work deserves respect and reverence, and I am so delighted to have you here. And that was shared by author and teacher and tribal elder of the Dagara tribe of West Africa. So thank you so much. We are in so need of the wisdom and what is in your heart to share and bring. I know this before we begin.
Thank you, Kerry. Shall we just dive in?
Yes. Kedar's talk is Awakening the Celtic Landscape Through Rites of Passage and Initiation. So what do you mean by the age of separation and the great turning, Kedar?
Well, it's a conversation that the title "Awakening the Landscape of the Celtic Lens or Perceiving" has more to do with the eyes that are looking than the land itself. And so this think many people have described this period that we're in as is beginning so long ago with these concept of separation, probably tracing far back as the domestication of animals and plants, and then the birth of planting cultures that created this separation between humans and nature, and then all of the systems of understanding and thought, including things like medicine and philosophy and religion and science, all were formed within the context of separation, meaning that once we began planting, moving from nomadic cultures to planting cultures, um, then we set up a relationship where we have to protect that which we plant, and therefore we're in opposition with everything that wants that resource. And these stories can be seen, throughout many origin stories, even biblically, and like the Garden of Eden is a story of this separation, and the stories of Cain and Abel biblically are the stories of these planting cultures in opposition with these hunting gathering cultures. Um, and so with this separation, we could say the realm of of spirituality and the realm of science became two separate schools of thought and understanding, and the realm of spirituality began to move skyward into the solar deities and to monotheism, and the understanding of the sacred was now something that lorded over nature as opposed to being infused within nature. And so when we look at what is this great turning, this awakening, this reawakening, is that we're moving away from the story of separation back to a story of connection. In the Celtic, if we just use the Celtic word and understanding for the sacred wasn't something that was out there, like up and out in some other world, some other place. It was in the land itself. It was in the mountains, it was in the trees, it was in the rivers and stones and glens and valleys, and it was present. There was no other world, it was this world. And so there was this unity of connection between the sacred and the everyday landscape that we walked and understood. Um, so over thousands of years of this separation story, um, spirituality became something that was in the other world, somewhere out there, and disconnected from here.
Yeah,
And so the problems with that is that the seeds of the story of separation has within it the seeds of its own demise. And so we're in this period of transition on the planet where the old systems are breaking down, and there's a tendency you want to grab hold of and hold on to what is familiar. And so what's happening, I see on the planet, is more and more the modernity's answer to the problem is through more and more separation. We'll create walls, we'll create nationalism. Everything moves toward more of a nationalistic walling off, separating, and it's like the last vestiges of survival is to start walling off and separating yourself, which is the continuation of that story of separation. And so, there's so much been written about that. I don't want to go into so much detail about, kind of the how we got here. But this place we're in, um, Joanna Macy calls the Great Turning, and there's this period where we're turning away from the old story, and we don't yet have the new story, this one of connection. This, I talk about the Celtic landscape is to understand that the sacred is infused within the natural world. It's not separate from us. Um,
Yes, this is so true.
And
Uh,
and so this return to animism, which is a type of conscious perception that everything is alive and animate and conscious. And so the new systems of thought, the new systems of biology, that are moving away from kind of the survival of the fittest, which is a very separatist kind of way of thinking about how we evolve, and the moving away from uh, the old science understandings, which would be more embedded in things like Newtonian physics, which is a very uh, particle separate physics of reality. And now we have things like morphogenic field resonance, which is a type of, from an animistic or Celtic perspective, it's a way of communicating with and being in relationship with the natural world. Like it's not separate consciously. We can connect. There's a type of reciprocity of responsibility that is asked of us. Um, and
Yeah,
so,
and
how do we?
John O'Donoghue would have captured a lot of that in his writings and his connection to the landscapes. And
Oh yes.
and it's so true as well what you say that like the spirit for some reason as we've grown up we've believed that the spirit is something untouchable up there away from us, and we
Mhm.
haven't perceived that the spirit is all around us. And
Yeah.
what's amazing about what you're saying is very, very quickly, if you take the time, if you take a bit of space to yourself and you go into nature, you'll be there'll be something soothed and
Mhm.
awakened in you nearly instantly. So that is so true what you're saying, that the spirit is everywhere, and that has been the big disconnect.
Right. So how do we begin to shift our eyes to be able to perceive? It's not like we're disconnected or have to do something to the land to connect. It's more of a perceptual dilemma that if we look through the eyes of separation, then what Einstein said is we can't solve the problems of our world with the same thinking that we use to create them. And so we have to step outside of a particular frame of reference of seeing everything as separate, um, and begin to look differently. So to go into nature, as you're saying, Carrie, if you've spent any amount of time or enough time in nature, in silence, listening, um, there's a way in which nature begins to wake up around you when you go, if you stay there long enough. When we first go into the natural world, and I'm thinking of where I live here in the mountains of Western North Carolina, um, all of the animals usually disappear because we're disruptive in our approach. Um, we can even say disruptive in our approach to nature, or disruptive in our approach to the sacred. And when we approach nature or the sacred in that disruptive way, it doesn't really approach us back. This may be borrowing a term from John O'Donoghue or David White poem about how to approach the sacred in a way that it turns its attention back towards us and recognizes us.
Yeah, and
And
I believe that as well, that actually when we're out walking and whenever we see a flower or a tree, or if when we acknowledge that it acknowledges us back, and like this would be like maybe a silly example, but from we've lived in this glen that the last 17 years,
Mhm.
and my husband would often remark to me, oh, there's more flowers and they never grew, and this didn't grow, and this didn't this, and this didn't that. And I always saying to him that they're growing for me because I'm always out
Mhm.
and speaking and communing with the
Mhm.
nature. But it's
Mhm.
it's like how do we reawaken the eyes and ears of the heart necessary for activating the landscape, the Celtic landscape around us? What would you say about that from all the experience, the deep connection that you have had?
Well, it's in this way that you say to go into the natural world and to approach it with a specific intent, and almost more importantly, a quality of attention that opens that veil of perceiving. Um, so that when we go into nature, we go into the natural, go on a hike through a park or, out into your glen there, um, to move into it from a place of actually deep listening and paying attention, um, uh, a way of being in relational context with the environment, to be in relationship with, um, not separate from. Um, so to enter into conversations with the stones, with the trees. I always think of gratitude as the gratitude is what I think of as the ground at which grace becomes possible when we're in this state of gratitude, that we can then see and experience things that otherwise we couldn't see and experience. Um, and um, there are certain gatekeepers that interrupt that. And I call gatekeepers are things that these old ways of thinking being that stand at the threshold between our ability to perceive this connected way of being. Um, and these gatekeepers, in stories and myth, gatekeepers often have a riddle or a challenge or a task that one has to complete in order to gain passage. So if you can think of gatekeepers, there are gatekeepers in our own awareness that challenge us uh, before we can actually access a way of perceiving the Celtic landscape. And the greatest challenge is our mind and its incessant running. Um, One of my Cherokee Native elder teachers here, Rocky Mary, said, the job of the mind is to record information and give it back to you when you need it, or to plan a strategy of action for something you may see coming down the road. He said, other than that, your mind should not be running the show. Your attention should be what would be engaged, your attention to the moment. And so that's why I say, what opens up this lens of the lens of the Celtic landscape is the quality of attention that we give it. Um, and it's a quality of attention um, that has more to do with listening and being still than doing and assigning meanings and interpretations and understandings.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
your raw presence. It's your raw presence in the moment just opens a door.
mhm.
But like you say, every single person is like a gatekeeper between that door. So every human on the planet walking the earth, we're all a gatekeeper till a door that
Mhm,
can be opened
mhm.
if we're present.
Right. Reminds me of another poet by the name of Adrian Rich. Has a poem called "The Door,"
The door.
and he says, "There is a door, and you can go through this door, or you can not go through. If you go through, there is always a risk of remembering your name. Things will look at you doubly, and you must look back and let them happen. If you do not go through, it's still possible to live a worthy life, to maintain your attitudes and maybe even your beliefs, and even die bravely. However, much will blind you and much will evade you. And at what cost? Who knows? The door itself makes no promises. it's only a door. And so there is this calling, as if there is this door of perception that we've been operating by, or this way of perceiving the world on this side of the door. And if you open that door and walk through into a different way of perceiving, a more animism way of perceiving the natural world around you, that's where it says things will look at you doubly, and you must look at them, look back at them, let them happen. So when you think of the evolution of human consciousness, and what we think of as reality in this world of modernity, where everything's separate and it's only been in existence for few hundreds of years, but the entirety of human consciousness, probably 99% of human consciousness, what we would consider normative, or the norm of human consciousness, is much more animistic, much more anchored in the reality of relationship with the natural world. That one thing impacts another, that your very thoughts and attention and quality of attention can has a way of resonating with the natural world around you. The way that when you said that very likely your presence and your attention to the understory and the flowers and the thing and that which is growing in your glen, that your attention and the quality of your relationship with it has invited it to come forward, in a way that if you had not done that, it may not have come forward.
And I know what you're saying, Kedar, is true, that creation can be brought forth, because I have had a couple of experiences. They haven't happened much, but just once or twice. And it's been like, even though it's this glen, it's this grass, it's the same river, like I remember distinctly having an experience back in 2017. I'd been in Peru and I'd received a healing from the lands there. And I came back and I was inspired to write. And I
Mhm.
remember, I was writing a manuscript and not knowing what the end of it would be. And I didn't worry about it. And I trusted it. I did worry about it, but I remember, this will sound so crazy, like I went out in the glen for a walk. It was just after winter, the snow was melting, and something actually happened on this landscape where it was like another dimension. It was the same, but the colors were different. The light
Mhm.
was different. It was like heaven was on earth. That's the way I'm going to put
Mhm.
it to you.
Mhm. Right,
And
they came together.
yeah. And I've heard stories of as well of other people where, say, they've been in cities. There's a particular story of a man who was going to he was sent to a place of the dying to
Mhm.
observe them. And before he observed these people, he had to get from the place in the city, he had to go through a place, and the place that he went through had a lot of poverty, a lot of pain, a
Mhm.
lot of disease and misery.
Mhm.
So he was with these sisters of mercy or whoever they were that were with the dying. He wasn't speaking, he was
Mhm.
just observing their work. And whenever he came back to his hotel
Mhm.
through the same place where he'd seen all the disease and all the misery and all the pain, all he could see was love,
Yeah.
beauty.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's so
Yeah.
incredible.
So we're talking about the shift in the quality of attention that we're able to offer to that which is around us. Um, and the quality of our attention is so often um, hijacked by our mind that's constantly spinning. Um, and everything's in a speeded up uh, way of thinking about it and working with it, and so the mind is hardly ever quiet. Um, so the mind becomes one of those gatekeepers that prevents us from from opening that door to a different quality of attention. Um, and there's when we slow down, say take rites of passage, going into the natural world, um, and rites of passage have been done all over the planet throughout history by many cultures, and it went by different names. Like I know in the British Isles, it might have been called hill walking. Like I'm going to go hill walking. That was kind of like I'm going to go into the natural world and meander. It could have been called walkabout down in Australia or vision quest over here in Native America. It's a way of like I'm going into the natural world to pay attention, to listen, um, and to awaken to listen with the ears of my heart and the eyes of my heart, um, to uh, to what's happening. And it requires one to be there long enough, to go into the nature and sit long enough. I can tell you what often happens for most people is when first their mind gets active. Um, and it will offer up all the things that maybe they hadn't thought about or they've been thinking about. Um, and then eventually the emotions come. Um, and if they allow those emotions to come through, that is often the doorway. Like on the other side of those emotions, there's a different perception. So, like in the rites of passage, say when you go into nature for a period of days, um, this is a natural thing that happens where all the social facades of how one presents themselves kind of breaks down because the trees don't care who we are, and the stones have no opinion about who we need to be, and the rivers aren't trying to be somebody else. And so who we have presented ourselves to be and who starts to crack and break away. And then often feelings and memories arise that need to be reconciled. Um, and as we move through those experiences, then there is on the other side of those deep emotions and reconciliations that happen within the heart, the eyes become differently attuned to the landscape. And everything all of a sudden colors become vivid, sounds become heightened, interactions become minute, microscopic kind of uh, interactions become perceptible um, because our attention is now all of a sudden extremely present moment focused. Um, we're once again able to see with the eyes of a child again, where everything all of a sudden appears as if for the first time. Like one of the exercises I will give my students, we'll have a little talk about all of this and about, you know, the new science of morphogenic resonance and holographic reality, and people can look up those things. I don't want to go into depth into those sciences, but um, this way of understanding connection rather than separation. Um, but once these eyes of the heart have been awakened, um, to go into nature, and this is an exercise I give my students, I want you to go for a walk and forget the names of everything, particularly categories of names. That can be even worse. That if you know that this is called a white oak, that's good. But to just call it oak or just to call it trees, it's like the slow naming of categories begins to create a disconnect. But what if you walked into nature with no names? What if you didn't have the name for anything you're seeing? What happens perceptually, and it's kind of a trick. You have to trick your mind to not, because the immediate tendency is want to name it and move on. Um, but if you hold suspend your perception at the place of not naming, then you're held in this perceptual relational dynamic with this being in front of you and held in a state of mystery. You don't know what this is. You don't have a story, you don't have a name. And all of a sudden, it's the mystery of what it is starts to play in front of you, not as a static meaning or construct of information that's fixed, but much more as a relational living experience. Meaning that it may appear to do something that didn't seem even possible for it to do by some old paradigm of thinking. Um, or you may see things that you couldn't see before. So it's this way of perceiving without the old story of separation. And you know, some of the other when I talk about domestication of animals and also the separation of spirituality and science, and then further along, you know, when language became written symbol and it went from oral traditions and storytellers of offering the passing on of story and history and connection through oral traditions and relational storytelling. Um, when language became symbolically written, it became fixed um, and even suspect of black magic, we might say. Like if you could write something down and communicate something without speaking, this was highly suspect. I love the notion that the word spelling came from that old context that if you wrote something that had meaning and you weren't speaking, that you might be putting a spell on somebody. So the context called spelling originally was from that old concept that, oh, you're spelling somebody. And now we have spelling, which means to write. Um, and even it reminds me of the word, you know, we're in this great turning of what so much is happening with between the polarization of separation, political systems, all these many different systems of polarization. Um, and this word apocalypse gets thrown around. We even have these popular shows on TV about apocalypse and zombies and things like that that kids seem to watch. And and the word apocalypse, if you look at a modern definition of that word, it means kind of like the final destruction, annihilation of creation. If you look at the original Greek translation of that word, apocalypse doesn't translate to mean destruction. Um, it translates to mean a revelation, something, we're seeing something that has been hidden. Um, it comes from the Greek word like apocalypsis, means lifting of the veil or finding out something that's secret.
That's
Something is
so
being
interesting.
discovered that has been in a dream or a vision. And so we throw that word around apocalypse as if the end times, this horrible destruction is like disaster. It's like, no, let's look at this a little more carefully. That something is hidden that is now becoming revealed. Um, something there's awakening happening. Um,
And
that
words
was
can be changed. This is interesting what you're saying. Words can be changed. But I'm sort of thinking of nature. Nature is what it is.
mhm, right. It's like if we you know look at the etymology of language and words, it's often what we discover that we have modernized definitions and meanings under the context of the story of separation. So we have apocalypse, which means final destruction of creation or something. Well, it's like, well, no, that's not what it actually means. It means awakening. Um, or, you know, I know in some contexts people will speak about the word pagan as if somehow that's negative. Oh, that's pagan thinking. Well, the word pagan means simply close to nature. Um, so I think it's
Yeah, a
important
lot of
to
words that are sacred and go back to old meanings that like they've nearly been made like dirty words, or like
Right.
they've been.
Yeah, they're seen in the context of separation as opposed to the original context in which they were intended. And so language, words, um, kind of reinforce the story of separation.
Yeah.
In indigenous languages, many indigenous languages had about 3 times the use of verbs that we have nouns, meaning that when you use nouns, a lot of nouns in your language, you create an object subject relational reality and of separation when things are described as nouns. When you described things as verbs, it means they're alive, they're moving, and they're in this constant flux of relational possibility. Um, and so it's just interesting to even look at how our language has gotten so uh, that continues to separate us, um, and use of uh, descriptors become ways to separate our connection with. And even attempts at spirituality, um, modern, even modern ways of thinking about spirituality is still separating us um, from this connection. Um,
Mhm. I know there's an artist over here, an author, Mackin. He has wrote the book "Listen to the Land Speak." Have you
mhm.
ever heard of that? Listen to the
um,
Land Speak. And
I definitely understand the concept of it.
uh-huh. And he would have a knowledge of the history of what you're bringing across here, of what you're seeing, that language was used in a totally different way to how we perceive it today. And
Right.
then I've often wondered as well, because so many people, Kedar, they don't value things unless they're wrote down. It's like as if the writing is the law.
Mhm.
And you would hear that, but also, like say for instance, we had the Ogham.
Mhm.
What do we
Mhm.
really understand about that or know about that? And that was so ancient. But
Mhm.
like the indigenous people and the indigenous tribes, it would have been oral. It would
Mhm.
have been a learning. It would have been a
Mhm.
process. It wasn't in your mind. You took this in all of you by, like
Mhm.
you say, through the initiations,
Mhm.
through the life that you lived then.
But it's very relational, and that's what we've lost is we've substituted relationship with categories of information. Um, and there's this illusion that if we had more information, like we all would be well. I think the use of AI in its most unfortunate form, because it's becoming so popular, is that if you have access to information, um, or even more information, or dissemination, integration of information, we'll be able to progress forward in a different way. When in truth, information can never replace relationship. Um, and that's what's missing, this concept of relational uh, reciprocity and respect. Um, like information cannot replace that. Actually, it can actually move us further away from that. But to go into the natural world, to sit quietly. Uh, One of the things when I tell stories about encounters with animals in nature, or moments of changes in weather patterns at very precise moments within ritual and within ceremony, um, like a moment where we're doing this. We're down at the river with this man doing a ritual, and he walks out into the river with support, and he's trying to access his own grief. And we're on the riverbank, and we're singing this song, and then all of a sudden this cloud moves in, and it starts to rain. Now we're probably 20 yards away from this man where he's standing in the river, and it's only raining where he is. It's not raining where we are standing. And as it rains on him, he begins to grieve. and then he begins to wail, and it loosens his grief. Um, I mean, I've had countless experiences with elements and with animals where something that is not usual that happens. A deer walks right into the middle of circle. I remember we were sitting in circle one time. A snake and a turtle entered at the same time and crossed the circle together. Um, a woman, we were doing a ritual with a pregnant woman by a pond, and a blue heron, this great bird, comes in and about 8 feet above her head, stops its flight and starts circling her. I mean, countless stories that where something different happens, and people say, why? How does this happen? And so I started thinking about, well, how does this happen when you're in that particular uh, ceremony or ritual, what I call ritual consciousness, a way of paying attention, the quality of attention that you're in when you're in ceremony, in prayer, in song. Um, and what I discovered is that what I believe is that we become recognizable to the wild and they move in close. But when we're in our kind of ordinary modern thinking mind and we're just kind of walking and stepping through nature and thinking about something else and not even present, um, the wild does not approach us. It's actually more suspect and distrusting of us. And we see that in things like equine assisted psychotherapy with horses. You know, they have this way of reading people, and they will approach a person if they're authentic. It doesn't matter what they're feeling as long as it's authentic. But the animal will not approach if the animal perceives that what they see on the outside is not what they perceive on the inside of the person, then they tend to hold back. And so I've noticed this way that when we are in that space, we become authentically familiar and recognizable to the wild so that a bird may land on our shoulder, or a squirrel runs across our lap, or a deer walks up to us and we're looking, or an owl drops in and stands right in front of us while we're sitting there. I mean, it's this quality of attention, what I call there's an authentic vulnerability of presence that we offer when we can move into that space. Um, but it does require us to reconcile uh, any kind of turmoil or upset that we've been holding or repressing um, that keeps us from being able to drop into that space. Um,
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that when we open up, it's not just nature and maybe the experience we can have with like maybe receiving a message from a tree. It
mhm,
happened to me once, but once was enough. You know, but not only that, like you say, this, like it is so huge, this gift that we have lost to not only be in communion with our plants, but our animals, the species that live around us and with us.
mhm,
And like what you're saying about the horses, a good few years ago, I was to do a fire
mhm,
walk by
mhm,
a shaman friend, and I was so nervous and I chickened out of the first one totally. I
mhm,
actually was physically sick. I was that scared to do
mhm,
it. So it was cancelled, but maybe about a year later, I did a fire walk and there was a huge group of us. And
mhm,
during the fire walk, the owner's horses, they have a black and white horse, and the
mhm,
horses never come up to the firewalks, but to that particular firewalk, the
mhm,
two horses came up and
mhm,
into this. They just wanted to be part of it,
mhm, mhm,
And I know, I've had experiences with foxes and different animals,
mhm,
but
mhm,
just that it's so beautiful, like, for people to to realize that we have like an inner technology and
mhm,
connection that has
mhm.
nothing to do with outer technology. And that,
Right.
if we can get back in touch with making time for nature and making time whenever sacred time, because that's the work you do, Keter, sacred initiations, that everything in life is so sacred. Our
Yeah,
being here, the animals, the nature, it's such a beautiful, beautiful gift.
yeah. If we could just, yeah, just carve out some time to just go into the natural world and pay attention. Pay attention to what is in the moment with you. Not be thinking about something else or thinking about somewhere else, um, but to call your awareness and attention to the very moment, to a dewdrop of water on the end of a flower. Just like bring your full attention, um, to presence in yourself, to that awareness. Um, it's like, if you want to make a place sacred, stay there long enough and notice the details of everything around you, smallest of details of everything around you. And in that noticing, you will have allowed those that live there to notice you. And in that exchange of attention and noticing, the place all of a sudden becomes alive and sacred, a place of information, a place of remembering, a clarity of thought. Um, and again, don't if some feeling or emotion arises that's uncomfortable, be willing to sit through it, breathe into it, give it life, let it move through. It's like the passing weather. Just let it move through. Because on the other side of that, um, there's going to be a different way of perceiving, different stillness in your being, in your heart, that can see differently and perceive differently. Um, and it's another thing that often offer are grief rituals, and they're very powerful rituals for being able to activate, and this way of perceiving is to kind of discharge the unacknowledged grief that we carry, whether it's our own or another's, to be able to return to that still place inside, um, of connection, relationship. Um, and then the other thing I would say with rites of passage, um, this way of going into the natural world, spending some time listening, paying attention, um, letting go of the names of things and just being there as if you don't know the name of anything. Uh, and then when you do have some experience, some awareness, something that happens, resist the tendency to ask the question, what does this mean? Um, because meaning, we often psychologize our reality and want to fix it with a meaning. And then once we have a meaning, we put it on the shelf and point to it and say, that's what that's about. But the moment you assign meaning to something, you have eliminated all the other possibilities of what the relationship can offer. Whether we're talking about a friend and a story we have about our friend, a lover, colleague, another person, where we trap them in a story and we create a meaning. This is their identity. This is who they are. But what if one day you woke up and you had no memory of the story that you have or the name you have about someone or something, and you just looked with curiosity? What might you then be able to see that you couldn't see before? Um, and so one of the things I like to tell people is, when you have an experience in nature or have a moment, um, ask yourself the question, uh, you know, or ask the holy, the sacred, whatever that is for you, the question, in light of this, what action shall I take? And that's very different than going to meaning. What action shall I take in light of this experience? In light of this conversation that our listeners and those out there are having while you and I have this conversation, at the end of this conversation, I invite those watching to ask the question, in light of what I have just witnessed or heard here, what action shall I take? And then not make it like with my life, because that's way too big and you can get lost in, never doing anything. What action shall I take right now, this minute, this hour, this afternoon? And what I will say is that the closer in you bring the question in time and space, like, what action shall I take right this minute? The closer in it becomes, the less likely it's going to make sense, because you might be guided to do something that you haven't, like, I don't have any idea why I'm guided to do this. It's telling me to walk outside and go down in my back garden and go down to the creek and find the rock and sit there and face east. And well, I don't know why, but I'm going to go do it. um, and so you let your response to the question be something that's close in enough that you don't understand why you're being guided to do this simple thing. Now I say, if it's within your integrity and in your values to do it, then just do it. And then watch what happens when you do it.
That's beautiful, Kedar. That is so
And then you'll
beautiful.
you'll be in this, what is often called, and with the Welsh word alwyn, the magical current. If you want to place yourself in the magical current of listening, then put yourself in a relational, interactive movement of receiving guidance and taking action in the moment, and just follow it with a curiosity. Not You don't really have any clue of why you're being guided to do this very thing at this moment. You're just doing it, and then you're watching, and now you're doing something else, and you're just kind of following this magical current of information that's leading somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
and did that for a whole day one time. It was actually fascinating. As I went into nature and I sat still and I didn't move until I had some guidance of what action shall I take. And if I didn't get anything, I just sat, sometimes sat for hours. But then when I got action, I would go do it and I would sit again. And then I would go do the next thing and sit again. And the whole day unfolded quite amazing. And the insights and things that came to me at the end of the day. But
Yeah,
while
that's
I
what I
was
was
in
saying.
it, while you're in it, you have no idea what's happening. It's that's why I say ritual and ceremony is nonsense, meaning that when you're in it, it should not be something you're making sense of with your mind. Matter of fact, your mind should be offline, and your attention and your awareness to the moment should be engaged, not sense making and meaning making.
Yeah.
Uh,
I know when you
Leave that for
talk about
later.
it, when you're talking about it, like I can feel like a heat. It's like a heat in the tummy and a heat in the body, like a
Mhm.
warmth. And it's it's
So,
a
so
type of
it's
a presence, isn't it?
yeah, it's a yeah, fire in the belly, fire in the
Yeah.
head. Something. There's a fire that's being ignited
Yeah. And
here
and that
in
day, whenever you did that for that day, I was thinking that whenever you closed that day, there was something so unique about it, something that,
what it was actually the third day of a 4 day vision fast, prayer fast, when I was out in the wilderness. And the day began with the bird. I was I was used to hearing this bird that would cross my where I was sleeping out in the woods, and I didn't have cover over me. And I hear these wings go by every day. And right before I was to wake up, I'd hear like these wings pass. And on this third day, I heard the wings come through, and I hadn't yet opened my eyes. And then I heard it land near me. And I was laying on my side like this. And then I heard it moving, and it jumped up on my shoulder. And then it jumped on my head, and it tapped me on the head 3 times, pop, 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 like that. And I like was fully awake then. And I woke up and I thought, okay, today I'm only going to move when I am like guided to like do something. Like this bird just did this. And so that's how the day started. Um, uh,
that's
and there's
incredible.
so many different things that happened that day that were quite fascinating. But
Yeah.
give yourself 20 minutes. Don't think you have to be out there for 4 days and nights. You know, take a moment, go into a park, mark a threshold of stepping across this threshold in the sacred time and space, and walk with different eyes. Everything as your teacher. Everything the Creator, the sacred, is offering to you as medicine, as guidance, and you just read the landscape like a diviner, um, and watch what happens. It's like the unfolding of organic poetry that's just coming out. You have no idea what's going to be said, what's going to happen. Um,
It's just magical. It really is. It's a magical sphere that we could all open up to.
mhm.
Just thank you so much, Kedar, for being here today with the Sacred Rainbow Current listeners. Thank you for everything
Awesome.
that you have infused us with, like the reality of what's available to us all if we just open the door and make the space. I want to mention two people that you have a beautiful free gift offering for people, and it's an audio version of Singing Stone, a beautifully crafted story of your initiatory journey as told by yourself. And that is just so precious, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with
Absolutely.
everybody.
Everyone enjoys that.
And I will be putting all of Kedar's details on the speaker page below where they can contact you, find out more about your work. And I do believe, I know you haven't said this on this talk, but you have been in the Celtic landscapes and
Mhm.
done quite a bit of work as well.
Yes, we've haven't been over there in a few years, but there were a number of years I was going pretty regularly. Um, and I've done my a personal quest myself in Ireland. And I think that the places where, like in March of the coming year, I know we'll be in southern Spain, offering a 11-day village encampment with a 4-day, 4-night prayer fast immersion in the mountains of southern Spain.
Beautiful.
Um, yeah, I'd love to see some of the folks that are on this uh, interview and conversation down the road, maybe around around that one of those sacred fires.
That'll be beautiful. And this is what, these connections do. These connections open up spheres and experiences for everyone. So just thank you once again so much, Kedar. Thank you
Thank you,
for
Jill.
your time and your heart for everything that you do. It's so appreciated. It's
Much gratitude to you.
beautiful. Thank you.
Everybody go well.